She watched him like a jaguar on the hunt for weeks, suppressing herself behind the trees outside of his residency, peering into his home through the windows on all sides. Emily Grierson wanted one thing: Homer Barron. Regardless of whether he longed for her and reciprocated her feelings of affection towards him, she was going to be with him for eternity. She was inclined to do anything and everything it would take to be with him. She wasn't always captivated by Homer Barron, though this obsession festered over a prolonged period of time. On September 29th, Emily Grierson met Homer Barron. They were introduced to each other on one of the rare occasions that she went outside her home. She was refurbishing the sidewalk outside, and she looked outside of her bedroom window to see why there was an unusual commotion in her neighborhood. She looked outside her window. She locked eyes with Homer Barron and was overwhelmed with attraction towards him. She needed to get a closer look. Emily stepped outside and approached her mailbox as if she was getting the mail so she could get a closer look at him.
My apologies for the noise, ma'am.
Homer said.
We will be finished shortly.
It's no problem at all. Take as much time as you need.
Emily responded with a wink. After a minor amount of small talk, they made an agreement to spend more time together during the next week by taking a ride around town in Homer's buggy. They met again the upcoming Sunday morning for the buggy ride. He picked her up at her residence around 10 a.m. The buggy strolled down the road for about an hour until they returned to Emily's home. The buggy provided them with a sense of privacy. It allowed Emily to feel as if the remainder of the town did not exist. Due to the two of them hitting it off during their time together, they started a tradition of going on buggy rides every Sunday. It was frowned upon by the town that they spent time together because Homer was a northerner and Emily was a southerner of high class. Emily never seemed to mind that he was a northerner or what the rest of the town perceived about them. She disregarded the rumors and whispers that they made about her and how the rest of the town pitied her. She just wanted to spend as much time with him as possible. They continued to embark on their weekly buggy rides for about a year. Emily found herself uncontrollably attached to Homer Barron. During the 6 days that they spent apart each week, Emily felt as though a piece of her heart was missing. She assumed that he felt the same way, since they continued to spend time together, bonding each week. Emily misinterpreted the situation, though, for Homer speculated that they were only friends. He was simply making an effort to make new acquaintances in the South, for Emily foresaw them as potentially getting married. Eventually, they spent more and more time together. As Emily fell deeper in love with Homer, she noticed he did not reciprocate these feelings. She would lean in while she was talking and notice a slight lean away, where she would try to spend more time with him, but he could never make more time in his schedule to see her outside of their Sunday buggy rides. After a few more weeks, it became apparent to Emily and the rest of the town that they were most likely not getting married anytime soon. If they were ever getting married, it would have already occurred. Homer Barron was not a marrying man, and when he told Emily this, she accepted that he would never fall in love with her. She began to devise a plan to spend the rest of her life with Homer Barron. On October 2nd, over a year after she first met Homer, Emily went to a pharmacist. She informed the pharmacist that the arsenic she was getting was for rats, but she had different intentions for the use of the arsenic. The poison was her key to spending the rest of her life with Homer. She began to watch him for many weeks so she could learn his normal routine and discover when the best opportunity to invite him into her home would be. At the beginning, she began watching him from outside his temporary home in the South. She was able to do so discreetly because he lived next to a large plantation covered in bushes, small trees, and dust. It was the perfect hiding place. She would watch him in the mornings before he left for work and would wait for him to return in the night. Then she would wait for him to leave again, to go who knows where. She would sit outside his home for hours at a time until she was bathed in dust from behind the hill of his house. After 3 days of this process, she discovered more about his routine and understood his schedule remained similar each night. He returned from work about 6:30 p.m. every night. She adjusted her lifestyle so that she would be able to watch him in the morning and then return home while he was at work. She would return to his home at approximately 6 p.m. so she would be there before he would come home for work. She watched him like this for weeks. Eventually, her curiosity overcame her, and she followed him to where he was traveling late that night. He walked to the local pub. When he arrived, he sat down at the bar next to a small group of young men and spurred up a conversation with them after sitting down. She watched them over a course of an hour. What happened next came as an utter surprise. After observing them talk for a while, she determined from his body language and smile that he was attracted to the young men at the bar. Now, at this point in time, she understood why Homer Barron had not proposed to her. He was interested in men. This confirmed what Emily already knew. There was only one route she had to an eternity with Homer Barron. After watching Homer for a little more than a month, Emily decided that she needed to get a closer look to get the best understanding of his personal life in order for her plan to be successful. She needed to find a way inside of his home without raising any suspicion that she had been watching him. She needed to get into his house using the house key that she had watched him hide in the flower pot on the front porch. Since she knew his routine, she knew that once he left for the bar every night, he wouldn't return home until 12 a.m. The best time for Emily to sneak into Homer's home was after he left for the bar. On a Friday night, Emily waited outside of Homer's plantation for him to return from work and set off for the bar. Once he left his house, she waited about 15 minutes to assure that he was at the bar and would not return home anytime soon. She walked through the howling wind to his front doorstep. She dug into the small patch of dirt next to the house and found the house key. She unlocked the front door and reburied the key so that she would not raise any suspicion that she had entered the house. The door creaked open slowly, and Emily peered inside. She crept swiftly through the first floor of the house and searched for anything out of the ordinary. After searching the house for about 15 minutes, she found nothing conspicuous. That was until she decided to look in his drawer. She opened up the drawer, and what she saw inside was shocking. She found an unimaginable amount of alcohol. It was as if the house was a liquor store. It was at this moment that Emily realized that Homer Barron was an alcoholic. The lid to the bottle of bourbon in the drawer was left off, as if he had just been drinking when he got home from work. She thought that he only went to the bar every night to try to meet young men, but he also went for the liquor. Homer evidently had a drinking problem, and Emily realized that she could use this fault to her advantage. She would wait until he returned from the bar one night, intoxicated, and then she would invite him over for a drink. Due to his physical and mental state, he would say yes and agree to come over. Once he arrived at her house, she could poison him. She could not survive another instant without having Homer to herself. She waited outside Homer's house the next night for him to return from the bar so that she could enact her plan. The trees came alive through the night from the strong winds, and Emily did not even seem to notice, for all of her focus was directed at the task at hand. Around 12:15 a.m., Homer returned, appearing fairly drunk. Once he had been inside the house for about 5 minutes, Emily made her move and approached him at his front door. She knocked, and he opened the door very shortly after.
Good evening, Homer.
Emily said softly but gleefully.
Hello, Emily.
Homer responded, frazzled.
What are you doing in this part of town so late on this?
He paused for a moment as if he was attempting to recall information.
Friday night?
I was going for a saunter around the township, and as I came upon your roadway, I decided I would see if you were home, and if you were interested in joining me at my residence for a drink.
Homer glanced at the clock near his front door.
I suppose it's not too late for one drink.
He replied with a slight grin. Emily smirked, knowing he would not be able to resist. They walked to Emily's house, conversing the entire way there. They began with small talk, and Emily felt as if she was being strangled, forced to hold back her feelings due to her fear of rejection. They reached their destination in about 15 minutes, and they went inside. Homer was having difficulty walking from being intoxicated, so she gave him a hand up the steps to her front door.
Make yourself at home.
Emily said to Homer as they entered.
I will go fetch us some wine from the cellar.
Homer sat at the dining table while Emily went downstairs to the basement to get wine. She poured each of them a glass of red wine, except Homer's glass had a large amount of arsenic, so that he would be able to relax. She went back upstairs, sat down at the dining table with Homer, and handed him his glass.
Cheers to a wonderful acquaintanceship.
Homer eagerly declared, raising his glass. Emily raised her glass, gestured a smile, and drank the wine in synchronization. Within a minute of drinking the wine, Homer began feeling very drowsy. He started to stumble around and make faint groans. The contents of the wine hindered his lungs from respirating. Then, as if God deemed it, he collapsed to the floor. Homer Barron was dead. Emily picked him up and helped him up the stairs into her bedroom. She laid him into her bed and watched him lay there, peacefully. Emily felt accomplished. She envisioned this night for weeks, replaying the scene before her eyes in her mind. She climbed into bed with him that night, as she would to continue to do for the rest of her life.